Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving right into literally every parent's worst nightmare, the public tantrum. We're going to break down the hard science behind why our default panicky reactions almost always fail us, and we'll explore how a really fascinating Japanese concept can completely transform the way you approach your parenting when things get highly stressful.
Picture this. You're in a supermarket at the end of a long day. Your cart is full, the checkout line is agonizingly long, and you're just running on fumes at this point. Between the bright fluorescent lights and all the background noise, there's this undeniable tension in the air. And then, it happens. Your child starts to cry. Not just a whimper, but a full-on, intense wail that makes absolutely everyone in a 50-foot radius stop and stare. Instantly, your body tenses up, your heart races, and as that social pressure builds, your one overpowering biological urge, driven mostly by the fear of judgment, is just to make it stop. You don't necessarily want to be harsh, right? You just feel this desperate need to shut the whole situation down immediately.
Now, faced with that meltdown, our default Western reaction is usually sheer panic. We try to distract them, we negotiate, we promise a candy bar, literally anything to get immediate control back. But flip the script for a second. Imagine that exact same explosive meltdown happening on a crowded, quiet train in Japan. The adult there doesn't panic, they don't frantically negotiate. Instead, they remain completely calm, present, and observant. They give the child space without shouting or making threats. Honestly, to our eyes, it almost feels wrong, doesn't it? Because it goes against absolutely everything we've been taught about correcting behavior in real time.
And that clash in approaches leads to a really painful, lingering doubt. You know that heavy, exhausted silence that finally falls after a tantrum? You've tried calming them, distracting them, getting firm, eventually just giving in, and nothing works for very long. So you inevitably sit there totally drained, asking yourself, am I doing something wrong here? Am I actually helping my kid, or am I literally just spending my days putting out fires?
Well, you are definitely not alone in feeling that exhaustion, and the data totally backs it up. Findings from the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry highlight something researchers call the inconsistency trap. Basically, as parents, we're constantly bouncing between control, distraction, and just being permissive because we're getting conflicting advice. But jumping around between all these reactive methods actually makes it much harder for your child to develop emotional self-regulation. So it's not just about any single thing you're doing wrong, it's the lack of consistency that traps you in that endless cycle of chaos.
So, let's start by reframing the root cause of all this, because behavior itself is really just a symptom.
To break out of this exhausting cycle, we have to completely change how we interpret a meltdown. And honestly, this offers instant relief for so much of the guilt we carry. Think about this idea. The problem isn't your child. You were just taught to react instead of trying to understand. When a tantrum hits, it feels personal, right? It feels like pure, deliberate defiance. But we have to realize that our society has conditioned us to quickly squash the superficial behavior rather than pausing to understand what's actually driving it.
Which brings us to the groundbreaking work of developmental psychologist Ross Greene, the author of The Explosive Child. He argues that behavior is merely a symptom. A tantrum is actually an indicator of a lack of ability, not defiance. Children are doing the absolute best they can with the skills they have in that moment. When they explode, it's simply because they don't know how to handle the frustration or the waiting or those massive, overwhelming feelings. And if the real problem is a missing skill, like patience or emotional control, punishing them doesn't magically teach that skill. Expecting a child to instantly self-regulate is kind of like expecting someone to run a marathon when they haven't even learned how to walk yet.
Which brings us to the art of Mimamoru and how to safely observe these tricky moments.
Okay, really quick, before we define this Japanese method, we need to clear up a massive misconception. A lot of parents try waiting it out by just ignoring their child, and things instantly get worse. Why? Because ignoring is emotional absence. As John Bowlby's attachment theory shows us, turning your back and leaving a child entirely alone in their distress actually spikes their emotional stress and can cause real harm. Observing, on the flip side, is a totally different ballgame. Observing means you are present, attentive, and fully available. You are providing a safe space without jumping in to intervene the very second things get messy. And that crucial difference is the heart of Mimamoru. It translates essentially to observing while protecting. You aren't abandoning them to their misery, but you also aren't yanking the steering wheel out of their hands. You are intentionally creating this safe, protected little bubble where your child can actually try to cope with their massive feelings, all while knowing you've got their back.
Actually doing this in the heat of the moment, yeah, it takes immense self-control. First, you have to fight your own deeply ingrained impulse to fix the crying right away. Second, just allow a few seconds for your child to try and organize themselves internally. Third, quietly offer some reassurance so they know they aren't alone in the chaos. And fourth, just watch. When they start to emerge from that meltdown even slightly on their own, they are learning a vital lesson. They can actually survive their own big emotions. That's how you build real emotional autonomy. A quick distraction is never going to teach them that.
Moving on, let's explore why connection absolutely must precede control when we talk about self-regulation.
So you're probably wondering, how does me just being calm actually wire my kid's brain to be calmer? Well, Alan Shore's work in developmental neuroscience hits the nail on the head here. His research shows that a child's capacity for self-regulation is physically formed through their relationship with you, their caregiver. We're talking about literally shaping the physical structures of the brain, the hypothalamus, the limbic system, the prefrontal cortex. When a child has a secure bond, their nervous system physically becomes less reactive. When connection is just a given, they don't have to fight for attention or act out to feel secure. Your closeness is literally building the hardware they need for emotional control.
It really all boils down to this incredible biological truth. They learn to calm themselves by being calmed. By letting them borrow your stable, calm nervous system early on, you are pouring the foundation that allows them to be truly independent later.
Okay, bringing it all together, real change starts with you and adapting Mimamoru to your real life.
Look, nobody is saying you need to blindly copy another culture. Japan has its own unique social challenges, for sure. The goal here is to adapt these principles to your own chaotic, messy reality. And as hard as this is to hear, your child's behavior is profoundly dictated by how you react, through a process known as co-regulation. If you get frantic and disorganized when they scream, their nervous system just matches yours. But if you can stay grounded in the middle of a screaming supermarket aisle, you become their calm reference point. Your consistency becomes their internal anchor.
So next time that pressure cooker is about to pop, let's try a new protocol. First, just acknowledge that panicky urge to take control. Second, force a physical pause. Stop yourself, even if it's literally just for 3 seconds. In that tiny little gap between their action and your reaction, the magic happens. Third, mentally shift from reaction mode into teaching mode. And finally, ask yourself what skill is missing here. Are they exhausted, frustrated? Do they just lack the words to tell me what's wrong? Suddenly, a horrific public tantrum transforms into a really profound learning moment.
I want to leave you with this one paradigm-shifting thought. Next time you feel the judging eyes of the entire supermarket on you, ask yourself, what if my job right now isn't to make it stop, but to understand? When you make that internal shift, I promise you, everything around you starts to change too. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this gives you a powerful new tool in your back pocket for those tough moments.